You're listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. My gosh, have I got an interview subject for you coming up. It is Thomas Ekelund, who is Trepaneringsritualen, all the way from Sweden via Berlin. He is playing 4 shows in Australia, and that's the reason for the conversation. I never thought I'd say that, to be honest. 4 shows in Australia. Unfortunately, he's not playing in Queensland. That's okay. It gives me an opportunity to go down to Sydney and catch up with my mum and also watch Thomas perform. I'll go through some dates. The 12th of July is the first. That's over in Perth at Inglewood, apparently. That might be in Perth itself. I don't know Perth that well, actually. So might be out in Perth or just outside of it. Probably a suburb of Perth. Anyway, I'll move on. Crowbar in Sydney, that's a show that I'm going to go to on the 13th. That's a Saturday night. The Tote on the 14th, obviously that's a Sunday night in Melbourne. And the final show is on July 16th at the Old Bar. It says City of Yarra in Melbourne, in Victoria, but I'm assuming that's in Melbourne somewhere as well. I'm as giddy as a schoolgirl on a Friday afternoon about Thomas coming down. I truly am. As you'll hear through the conversation, his music helps me go to sleep. I do put it on when I want to relax, I must say. Now, that might sound odd to the people that first discover his music, but probably not to the people that get into his music and really take the time to discover the beauty of Thomas's creations, or if they're not his creations, he's a lightning rod for something else far beyond. You hear me talk about Trag Zagto through this conversation here as well. I think Thomas is probably the most inventive artist out there since him. Not just a guitarist, of course, because he might well play the guitar, but if you know Thomas's music, it's a mishmash of just about everything else. Let's go and listen to what Thomas has to say. Here we go. How's things?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's good to chat to you again. Actually, I was really excited to see that you were coming down because you probably recall we had a chat about a year and a half ago.
I saw the name in the list, and I remember.
Yeah, it's the podcast episode. I'll let you know, mate. It was really successful. A lot of people listened to. A couple of hundred people listened to it, which is pretty good for me, mate. To be honest, and the interesting thing for me is that most of my audience is in the States, and that continued. Okay, so even though I'm here in Australia and I'm Australian, about well over half of my audience is in the States, but they listened to it, mate, and hopefully it converted a few who might not have been aware of you, and that was the whole purpose of that conversation at the time.
Hopefully.
You know. So, mate, I mean, you've had a lot go on since we last talked. You released... Yeah, I mean, go through a few things here. You released a brand new album in September 2018, the excellent Alpha Enigma. You released at a very good discount your entire discography, which I duly purchased on Bandcamp. So I've been able to get some of that goodness into my life and continue. If you recall our conversation last time, I use your music to help me to go to sleep. It sends me off into the nether realms, and it still does that, mate. So thank you for...
That's sweet.
Yeah, keeps on doing that. And then, mate, and the touring, I've seen the touring's been going really well for you, and lo and behold, something that I didn't think was going to happen for many years, you're in Australia.
Yeah.
So, mate, where do we go after this? You know, these Australian shows. Yeah, I mean, you must know, obviously, that the fact that you can come down here, and I know you're not playing in my part of the world. I'm actually flying down to Sydney to watch you play. But
thank you very much.
You've got 2 shows in Melbourne and you've got this show in Sydney. So do you even know what sort of a show you're going to bring, or is it something that you sort of prepare much closer to the date?
No, it's going to be the same set as I do in Europe with my regular drummer, but with Damien from Collapse filling in because Peter, my regular drummer, couldn't make it, sadly. So it's going to be a 45-minute set of mostly based around Coins Cult and some newer stuff as well.
Yeah, well, Alpha Enigma, mate, has that done for you what you wanted it to do for you? Do you think it's reached the ears of the people that need to hear you?
Yeah, I think so. It was a very quick one to make. Henrik and I we had a notion, and it was done in a week, I think. It's a very focused and purposeful album. Some banishments that needed to be made and turned into a record, and then
So what were those? What were those banishments? What were those things that you needed to cast out from your sound and from what you were delivering to people? Anything specifically that you can share?
No, we shouldn't go into the details of that one. It's it's some things that Nordvarger and I identified and needed to deal with.
Yeah, that's interesting because I find your music so varied that each of the albums that I've gotten, the various EPs and single releases that you have there on Bandcamp that are now safely ensconced into my iCloud library. Your stuff is so varied, man, that it's so hard for me to describe to people, and I often do try and end up failing. Your music, I often try to relay to people that if you want to listen to something genuinely different, something that I think is going to help you create new neural pathways so that you can get and do other things in this world, your music is actually a place to start. So it's very interesting to hear that things needed to be released in order for a new path and a new direction to be forged. Because I've always found you, mate, you revolutionise your sound and the way, now that I've got your catalogue, I recognise the growth and I recognise the way in which you revolutionise your sound every release.
Yeah. There's always new impulses coming in and new, like we talked about the last time. I'm not that much in control of what's actually happening most of the time, but it always seems that I always try to see if there's any new aspects that need to be included, or if what's needed to be done to get to the next level, and that ultimately means that things, I wouldn't say it gets, it's not that spread out, but it also means there are different impulses and there are different aspects of the working that needs to be manifest in some way, and sometimes that requires something quiet and slow and meditative, and sometimes it needs to be violent and forceful, and
You're right.
do whatever's needed. That's what I do. So
between us talking, I actually reached out to a lass called Erica Fravel, who's in the States there. I think she's in the Northeast somewhere. You might have heard of her, but she's this, I want to say world famous, Instagram famous void worshipper. I think she's actually left. Yeah. She's still on the platform, but I think she's actually left. But I reached out to her and I said, look, I didn't mention you, of course, but I was thinking that she'd be about the most interesting person that I'd spoken to if I could line up an interview with her since yourself. But she's gone. Yeah. She's gone. So I don't know what she's done. She's sort of got a page there, but she's just got black images. But she was into something called void worship. That's her thing, and I now that I sort of dived really deep into it to try to understand what it exactly was. But is void worship and meditating with close to the void, is that something that's important for you as well?
Yeah, I think that is probably the essence of the whole working. Ultimately, trying to reach beyond everything created and finding yourself in that sort of natural state of unbeing, or whatever you want to call it, the emptiness that's outside of creation.
Yeah,
because I think that's our natural state. That's how we're supposed to be. The physical manifestation of the cosmos is a mistake at best.
I'm inclined to agree with you since our last chat, because I've actually listened to our conversation a few times. Yeah. And it's so deep, some of the topics that we got into there, it was really necessary for me to continually revisit it in order to sort of connect with your music on a level deeper each time. You know what I'm saying? It really helped, the conversation that we had last time. It really helped me unravel the mysteries of your music, if you will, and I actually do understand what you're talking about. And the other theory that I don't think we touched on, although we may have from memory, was fire. So the only true creative force is fire in the universe, because that is that heat and fire. And you made a really good point about everything living seems to be in this state of agony, including us. I mean, if we didn't have modern medicine, we'd all be dead by the time we were 10. We'd never pre-propagate ourselves, would we? I mean, it's Jordan, no. And Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot too. Not the void and other things that we talked about in the past, but he talks about how when people want to go back to nature, he goes, do you know what you're actually saying? Do you know how violent nature actually truly is and how destructive it is? And the reason that we as human beings have evolved to live in cities and we need civilization and society in order to function in this. It might be an illusion that we've created for ourselves, but an illusion that's very real to so many of us.
Definitely.
You know, and so that's a good question for you, mate. Have you connected with any of these modern day philosophers like Jordan Peterson? Do you connect with their message at all?
No, I don't pay much attention to those things at all. I know the name, but I've never really read or heard him speak or anything. But there seems to be a general need for abandoning the so-called civilization.
Yes.
I think it's built into us. We're not supposed to be here, and we're certainly not supposed to be 100 years old and live in concrete buildings, and it's very unnatural.
So if the void is...
I mean, it's an unnatural thing on top of something I also think is unnatural, because our primordial state is not physical.
So where does the soul exist then? Because assuming we have one, or do we have one, that's a good question for you. Where does it exist? Yeah. Because there is some God force or some force beyond the astral realms that is compelling us to be held together, as human beings, as a physical entity. So what's that?
That's a very good question. That is hard to answer. I think the soul is as an idea is part of this creation, and maybe it really isn't something real. Maybe it's just the aspect of us that is actually looking for the primordial state. That's our soul.
Why do people like you? Why do people like you and I then, truth seekers, if you want to call us that? Why do we exist, whereas 98.9% of the population, probably far greater than that, maybe 99.9%? Why do you think that they're walking along in this, this material void where they're attached? And look, I'm attached to the outcome of rugby games and cricket matches and all that sort of stuff. I can't help it. I'm a human, right?
No.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, why are we aware of this thing that is beyond our consciousness? And you're far more advanced than I am with regards to this, and so far as you're actually connected to it and you help it helps you make music, and really you're the vehicle for it to make music, I should say. But why do you think we as human beings tend to just drift?
I think most, I don't know, we have a physical side, and I think the physical side is probably very powerful. It wants to exist. That's like the sense of self-preservation. There's something in your body that really is attached to all the material things, and unless you work very hard at it, you're not going to be able to escape that. And that's a process. I mean, I think that every turn you have to, every time you need to get back into the physical world, you're bound to learn a little bit more, and eventually you know enough to actually be able to set aside your physicality, even if only briefly. As long as you're forced into rebirth, then you're going to be attached to the physical world. But eventually you get to the point where you can actually let go and not continuously be respawned into this cosmos.
Yeah, that's a real interesting theory or question that I put out there to people, actually, people like yourself who know, because I too am convinced that we're entering into this cycle of reincarnation with not a lot of ways out. We just keep on going through it, and I'd love to understand. I think part of the purpose of it is to force us to forget and to really be stuck here. Don't mean to dive into what some of these Scientologists believe, because I'm certainly not that. But it just seems to be this reincarnation cycle, and it's like, well, how much options do we really have in this cosmos to truly evolve?
Very few. As long as you have a physical body, you're always going to be an animal, and an animal is violent and basic and doesn't get very far. At least most of them.
No.
Well, maybe that's not fair to say that animals are base, but they are in a way. We all are.
Well, there's only two things that they do, isn't there? Or three things, really. They propagate the species, they eat, and they shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's about it. They're not building civilizations like what humans are. We're definitely much further along because of this gift of sentient consciousness, which can also be a bloody curse, can't it? Because we're so, people like you and I are aware of our shortcomings and our fragility, and we feel like as though we want to evolve beyond into whatever the genuine next stage in our spiritual evolution can be. But I think it's inevitable, mate, that we've got to come back.
Yeah.
How did we break it? I mean, that's the question that I wish somebody could answer for us.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, I think.
Well, you're doing a good job, but you're doing a good job because you're doing it through music. And I honestly believe that. I actually believe that. I know these two things. This is going to sound batty, okay, but I actually believe people who perform at a very high level at sport are very similar to people like yourself, okay? Because you understand how to isolate extremely important aspects of your life and focus.
Yeah.
And that's what you're able to do. Is like when I look at the Formula One race car drivers, for example, or the NASCAR drivers. I don't like NASCAR that much because we don't have it here, but Formula One, of course, they've got the one down in Melbourne, and I really admire. What's the name of the Australian rider at the moment? The driver at the moment. Sorry, I've got a shocking Daniel Ricciardo.
No idea.
Daniel Ricciardo. He just seems like as though he's just so focused and all the rest of it. And you and him, even though to people listening, it sounds like a naff comparison. I think you guys that have a lot in common if you were able to talk to each other. He's zooming around tracks so fast, and you're doing something similar with regards to your connection to source.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but possibly because I have no interest in sports whatsoever. But any sort of endeavor that requires focus means that you need to be attached to parts of your being in a way that maybe most people aren't, and that can be anything, I guess, from cooking to creating art to playing sports. Even though I think art is probably above everything.
Agreed.
Because it's the only, it's a truly sublime form of communication. It's not, I mean, in a way it's connected to physicality because, sound is just vibration, so that is physical, but it's abstract in a way that no other art form is. Painting is just painting, and photography is photography, but music is one step further, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you. When I look at really what our contributions to the universe or the broader cosmos would be, genuinely in terms of forging brand new pathways and stuff, yes, I've already said sport because I think a lot of these people, they go beyond where their human body is failing them, yet they still find a way to go on. But I also think
that is definitely true.
Yeah, but I also think it's really true for artists as well, because people like you are breaking down mental barriers within yourself and forging new neural pathways, new spiritual pathways, and that is where genuine creation occurs. Okay,
that's true.
And I love even this artwork here, mate, that you've done that's accompanying that you can purchase from the UMAC website. That they've done this black and red artwork. Is this something that you've come up with, or was that Damien and the guys here?
No, I designed that. I found a picture in a book in my library. The first picture I found when I was looking for something for the poster was these Australian spirit dancers. It doesn't exactly state which tribe or anything like that, but I found it kind of intriguing. The first picture I saw when I opened the first book when I was looking was actually from your part of the world.
It's meant to be. It's meant to be. Yeah. I love it. It's just great. I'm actually going to get the poster and block mount it so it doesn't decay, because I do that with some of my stuff. It's great, mate. I think people out there need to support you. I mean, you've mentioned it, man. We're all sort of captive to this bloody material world, whether we like it or not. We've all got to live here, no matter how enlightened we might be, the Dalai Lama or what have you. We've all got to live here, mate. We all need money. I think it's so important that when we identify that there's somebody like you that is helping humanity move forward, and you're doing it through your music, that we support you financially. And the internet is 20 years ago it couldn't have happened, of course, because the internet didn't have the penetration, but we can support you these days by doing that.
Yeah, that's the fantastic thing about modern technology, especially when you're doing things that don't appeal to most people. You're able to reach the right people in a way easier way than, you have always been able to. I'm old enough to remember when you sent money across the globe for things, but it certainly was a lot more work finding the sources to what you needed.
Yes, that's right. And what's your views on social media these days? I mean, I assume it actually really helps you, because it was the way that I was able to connect with you. Do you find it as a necessary evil, or are you quite positive about it?
I wouldn't go so far to say it's an evil, but I'm also not overly interested in it. It's just a way of communicating. And obviously, creating art means that you need to communicate. And yeah, it's just a way to communicate, quick and easy. But
yeah, here's a good question for you then. Okay, does an artist need an audience?
I don't know. It depends on the artist, I guess. I think I would. I mean, TRP in a lot of ways is about making me grow as well. So I guess I would, in some sense, I would be doing it even if no one was paying attention. But I also feel it's an important aspect of TRP that this needs to be taken to as many people as possible. If I can reach everyone, then I'm gonna reach everyone. I have no notion of keeping it cult or necro or whatever people say. It's just I wanna reach as many people as possible. Most people are not gonna get it anyway. So, but if you reach 9 billion people, then you reach as many people as you can.
Yeah, it's so true what you say. Most people won't get it anyway, so you might as well reach as many ears as possible. So as though the one in, I don't know, what's the ratio? 1 in 100,000 or so people that do listen to you can actually connect with you. So I think that's why I've just, because since we last spoke, the big change for me in my life is that I'm at university. Okay, I'm at a good one at Bond here on the Gold Coast, and I'm learning I'm studying journalism, and I'm 3 semesters in. This is my 3rd semester now, so I'm going through something of a reinvention myself, and I'm really passionate about artists like you. And I actually, you of course know the band Morbid Angel. I reached out to Trey's mother to have a chat to her. And
that's interesting.
She's open to it, mate. She's actually open to it. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
Oh, it's wonderful because, as you probably know again, Trey is very hard to get to agree to do interviews. I don't even think he does them.
Yeah.
So I had a chat to Steve Tucker at the release of Kingdoms Disdained, actually, at the end of, might have been just before I spoke to you, actually, now that I think about it. He was a lovely guy, but, mate, Trey is Trey. He's the iconoclast of modern, not just death metal guitar playing, but of all guitar playing, in my view. And
Indeed.
I've had some very nice interactions with his mother online, so hopefully I can line her up. And when I say line her up, God, it sounds a bit odd. Hopefully I can, I can have that conversation with her, and we can release it for people to listen to, because I'm really keen to understand how Trey grew up and what sort of influences are in the home life, because he's a bit similar to you. Again, I think he's somebody that you've got a lot in common with, and it'd be interesting to, I think about this sort of stuff. I think if I was doing a podcast and if I could have any guests on that I want, I'd like to have someone like yourself and Trey on at exactly the same time, and we just go to Alpha Centauri and beyond.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be very... The thing for me is trying to find out what people who make music, which I think is really important for humanity's sake, what you guys have got in common. And it might turn out you've got nothing in common, but it'd be nice to explore that on a podcast, like in a conversation for a podcast episode, and actually see if it bears fruit. Because I think there are a lot of people out there like you and I who are truth seekers and who aren't fixed on a particular ideology. We're just moving beyond, and we're just open to new ideas and stuff. And I think that's really apparent in both yours and his creations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't actively listened to Morbid Angel in probably 20 years, but there's obviously something in...
Yeah, don't know, maybe forces beyond are conspiring against us to cut the call off.
Yeah, or not talk about Morbid Angel, I don't know.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? Yeah, sometimes these things happen. Yeah, sometimes you think, maybe that's a sign not to talk about it anymore. So I guess we'll take it and move on to the next topic of conversation. Yeah. But mate, your Australian fan base, and when we last spoke, you were aware that you had an audience down here, and you were aware that you had fans interacting and the like. But how did Damien reach out to you to organise this, or were you just, as I recall, you were actively looking for a promoter to actually get you down here? So was it you that reached out to him, or the other way?
No, it was Damien who asked me. I've known him for a few years now, and he got an opportunity to get me down there, and he just asked if I wanted to go. And obviously I said yes, because, you don't say no to things like that.
Mm. Yeah, no, well, it's fantastic. And have you had a lot of interaction with this via social media as well? Have people been, has the response been good? Like, in other words, I guess I'm asking the direct question, of pre-sales gone well for you?
I don't know, actually. There seems to be a lot of excitement going on. I've been fairly preoccupied with everyday stuff lately, so I haven't really been following up on what's going on. But it seems to be people are happy that and amazed that I'm going that far to play, and it is pretty amazing. I mean, it's the other side of the world, so.
I've been raving about it. I'm so excited. Yeah, believe me, I don't like Sydney, so it's got to take somebody like you to get me to go down to Sydney. So, no offense, people from Sydney, but but it's just not that nice, mate. To be honest with you, as a city to live in, it's just a bloody hard city to live in these days.
I can imagine.
My mother actually lives down there, and I only ever occasionally go down there just to bring my daughters down there to see her. And I'll be doing the same thing. I'll bring my daughter down there, and she can stay overnight and have granny time, and I'll go out and watch you and the other wonderful artists that I think Damien's got lined up on this UMAC festival. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I mean, it's, what's the old saying about two birds with one stone?
Exactly.
I think I was about due to go back down there anyway, but it's just a wonderful opportunity for people. Anybody listening to this that's in Australia and has the opportunity to come and watch you. Now the dates are in June and July, so you're down here for about 2 weeks, but you've only got the 3 shows. So are you doing?
I think it's 4 shows.
Oops, my bad. Sorry. Yeah, it is 2.
Yeah,
it's not 2 weeks.
Starts on the 12th, and I think it's 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. I don't remember exactly what the 4th city is, but as you said, it's Sydney and 2 dates in Melbourne, and I think the 4th one is Perth. But yes. I can't swear on it. But
no, you're right.
Check it out on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now on Facebook. Sorry, I did have it up before, but it's just Facebook compresses things. And then when you open it up, you don't have 3 shows; you got 4 shows. So 12th of July, you're at Inglewood, which is in Perth, I believe. Then you're in Sydney, the show that I'm going to, which is a Saturday night on the 13th of July. Then the Tote, which I think is a very famous venue down there in Melbourne. And then there's a venue that I've never heard of before, but no doubt it's good if you're booked there. It's called the Old Bar on July the 16th.
Yep.
So you've got 2 days for. Have you got any? I mean, I wouldn't say sightseeing. You know what I mean. But are you going to get the opportunity? You don't remind me. You don't strike me as the sort of bloke who wants to go and pat the koalas. Put it that way. But
I actually wouldn't mind. I do like animals, but I hope there's time to see some interesting things.
Yeah, I hope I hope Damo and the crew down there have got some stuff lined up for you, because it's a long way to travel, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
My interactions with him online, by the way, have been very pleasant, which always helps. So, but yeah, no, Melbourne and Sydney, they're big metropolises at the end of the day, and they're both, they're both. Close enough to the bush and to animals and stuff to get out there and have a bit of a look. So hopefully that happens.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really the most interested in. Cities are cities; they're pretty much the same anywhere.
But
the bush would be interesting to see, because it's so very different from anything I experience here, of course.
Well, just. If you get an opportunity to, now I'm just looking at the dates here, and I don't think you will, okay, which is unfortunate, but there's a fella called Rex Gilroy, who's an old fella, and what he does is he goes across Australia and looks for evidence of previous civilizations outside of Aboriginals. Now, he says that he's found evidence for Phoenician ports in Queensland in a place called Serena. But the reason I mentioned Sydney, because in Gosford he reckons that he's found some hieroglyphs. Now, of course, there have been people that said, no, they were done by people who had no idea, and you can tell because the hieroglyphs don't match, but they look bloody old. They look like they're from different dynasties and stuff. And I think it'd be crazy, without having the concrete evidence and assuming that this isn't concrete evidence, it's just something that someone's done, that civilizations, seafaring civilizations, especially like the Phoenicians, wouldn't have been here. But yeah, if you Google Rex Gilroy, he's got whole theories, and what he says is absolute evidence of these civilizations.
It is actually quite intriguing that you mentioned this, because I stumbled upon, I think it was him, I stumbled upon this theory just like a week ago by accident. And it intrigued me quite a lot, and it does make a lot of sense to me. I really don't believe that civilization is only a couple of thousands of years old. Humans have been around for so many hundreds of thousands of years that there's bound to have been civil or advanced civilizations before.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in a country as old as Australia, we are the oldest above sea level landmass in the world. That's why we've got no genuine mountains like what you guys do in Europe and in Scandinavia.
No.
We've got cold parts, but people just don't live there really all that much. Snowy mountains, they call them. You'd probably laugh if you saw our snowy mountains because it's about, 10 ski fields or something. They only operate for a couple of months a year. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff, man. It's really interesting. There's north of me here at a place called Gympie. Rex says that there's something called the Gympie Pyramid because of the stone structure that's there. But then a lot of the locals go, no, it was an old Italian farmer that came in the early 1900s, and he decided he wanted to section his land by putting these sandstone, or not sandstone, I don't know what they are, to be honest with you, what sort of brick they are or stone they are, but he's there's a lot there, man. I think he must have stumbled across him because he's the only one really of prominence outside of a few crackpots that has really done the investigation and gone to these places. And
those people are very, very important. There's a extreme sense of conservatism in historians and archaeologists that I don't really enjoy, or I think it's counter. It doesn't seem realistic, though. The timelines that are proposed by the majority of historians, it doesn't make sense, and that it just seems scared to admit it. And it's just a matter of, again, opening yourself up to the possibility that things aren't exactly the way people tell you that it is.
The older I get, and I'm sure you're of a similar mindset, the more older I get, I stop reading history books, published history books by major institutions, because I don't believe them, actually. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. It's from the perspective that there's look, this is very controversial, this one here, okay, but you might have heard of something called Mungo Man.
Yeah.
Now, Mungo Man is a completely different hominid species from the Aborigines according to mitochondrial DNA testing, okay?
Yeah.
In year 2000, by the way. And then 15 years or so later, I think another university said, no, they got it wrong and it's definitely Aboriginal Australian. Now, you can imagine the consequences of this, okay?
Yeah.
This is a hominid which is dated at 60,000 years of age, which at the time it was dated was a full 20 or 15,000 years before the arrival of Aborigines. All of a sudden, you've got a hominid species that existed here before the arrival of Aborigines, and that theory, according to some institutions and some historians, has now been said, no, they got it wrong. The DNA was contaminated. It's actually an Aboriginal thing, Aboriginal DNA, and also, too, that means that out of Africa is still intact. But the reality is, for a period of time there, with the technology that they had, they're saying year 2000, I think it was the University of Adelaide or the ANU, one of the two. I don't want to get it wrong, of course, because people are going to be listening to this. People do your own research on this one here. But, and then they what do they say, reinterred the remains of Mungo Man from the UK, from England, because, all of our important stuff went across to there because of our colonial heritage, and did an Aboriginal ceremony for it. But I think that, you talk about these things being... it's too easy to say it's about political correctness, but it is certainly falling under that banner. But I think when you got you know what I'm saying, you got really important discoveries like this, and then they go and revisit history and go, no, they got it wrong. It's actually this. It keeps this line of history intact, exactly to I think some of the things you might have been referencing a moment ago or beforehand. And I think it's very disappointing because we want to know the truth, and it doesn't mean that the Aborigines haven't been here for a very long time and were the longest existing civilization or longest continuous existing civilization. It doesn't take anything away from that. We just want to know what our real history is.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's ultimately all these things are pretty meaningless information, but it's certainly very interesting, and as an intellectual exercise, it should be within everyone's interest to actually get as close to the truth as possible, even if there's lots of things we probably can never find out. At least, I mean, it's an exercise for the mind, and then you should actually strive to be as correct as possible.
The other one is the pyramids are a lot older. That's an old one, though. Everybody knows that one. They're far older than 4,000
I mean,
years.
that's not even controversial anymore.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, it's becoming mainstream that they're far older than that because of the. I was listening to Joe Rogan and he had somebody come on that. I don't know whether they're an expert or not, but someone was talking about it anyway, and they're saying, no, if you look at we study the effects of water on stone and on minerals, and we're talking that I'm just going to pull a number out here. It is tens of thousands of years older than what historians claim that it is at the moment.
Yeah, last number I read was that it cannot be younger than 10,000 years old because it's eroded by rain, and it doesn't rain in that part of the world for at least 10,000 years.
Well, expect the status quo to continue. That's what I would say, because as long as there are vested interests in keeping people stupid and
of course,
and keeping people tribal, which is the bloody awful thing, and keeping people particularly in Europe, there's this identity politics that occurs right across the States, and we've got a little bit of it here, although not as much as what I think you guys have got of it in Europe, but that it really seeks to divide people.
Yep.
And that's a terrible thing, mate. We're all part of the human race, okay, and we are notable for our differences, and our differences should be celebrated. I love different cultures. I don't want to have...
Yeah, I mean, monoculture is boring.
I find something very positive about every culture that's ever existed. I truly do. There's a lot we can learn from everybody. There's no point in having homogenous humanity.
No, and it's impossible as well. I mean, your circumstances are going to make you different. Even if we have access to all this information and you instantly know what's going on the other side of the world, you're still a part of where you are at the moment, and that's always going to be different.
Indeed it is. How's things in Sweden these days? Because I've spoken to a lot of artists from Sweden, and I can tell you some of the feedback I get ain't pretty.
There's a reason I moved, but...
Oh, you're not in Sweden anymore?
No, I moved to Berlin last year.
Oh, God. How was that?
That's good.
It's
far more practical place to live for me.
Yeah. I actually thought you would have moved more rural, actually. So you've gone right back into a metropolis. Suppose you had to.
It's pretty much the only city I can see myself living in. I would like to live in the countryside, but that's not feasible at the moment. So
yeah, it's not practical.
Live in a city that I actually enjoy being in.
What do you like about Berlin? What are the things that really appeal to you?
It's sort of it has a lot of good sides. I mean, it's in the north of Europe, so things actually work, but it's also a very casual vibe. Things can happen that whatever you want to do, you can do. So it has a little bit of the southern mentality in it, but like I said, things still work. It's also, I mean, logistically practical because it's fairly central in Europe. I can get to gigs easier, which is a good side of it. Instead of having 10 hours to travel, I have 2 hours to travel. And I mean, there's a lot of culture going on, everything from like music to old art, and the climate is a little bit better, and it's a nice place.
Yes, I've only ever really heard people rave about Berlin. I've got to say, Australians that have gone over there, and a lot of Australians do live in Berlin. I've noticed.
Yeah, I know plenty.
Yeah. What is it? I don't know what it is. We tend to love Europe, Australians. We tend to go and live over there, and even my brother and sister have lived in England for years, and they've come back. But they've gone over there. To be honest, I don't have any desire. Not that I don't not like the place, but I just prefer Asia. I do love Asia, and South America. I definitely want to get across to South America as well.
Yeah, that's on my list as well.
Yeah, that'd be Argentina is a country that really fascinates me, actually, because they play rugby there, and I've mentioned I love rugby, and a lot of South Americans do remind me of Australians, Spanish-speaking Australians. I've got to say they tend to sort of what's the old saying? Work to live, not live to work.
Yeah,
which I think is a real issue.
That's a good principle.
I was shocked to hear that Australians work the longest hours in the developed world. That really surprised me, but I think that's isolated to the capital cities, Sydney and Melbourne. I don't think that's like that up here at all. Everybody I know that I associate with, and I associate with a lot of people, have a pretty good balance.
Yeah. That's important and hard to achieve.
It's very hard to achieve, mate. Yeah. Well, mate, it's been another fantastic chat. You know, I've got to say, pleasure. I'm just so thrilled that that Damien reached out to you and that there's an opportunity for you to come down. I wouldn't miss this show for the world, mate. I've got to say, and anybody listening, if there are tickets available, this is, you know, Thomas as an artist, you've got to see to be believed. And I've watched plenty of your videos online, and I can't wait to see you get up there and do what you do. It'll be so interesting to watch you. Yeah. Even better the second time around, mate. Thank you very much for the conversation.
A pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate. Catch you.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that interview subject was the most excellent Thomas Ekelund, who is the Swedish via Berlin artist, Trepaneringsritualen. Thanks so much for listening.